Okay. All right. Good afternoon, class. Good to see you today. Here we are beginning week number 5 of Microeconomics. So I appreciate those of y'all who come to class. Even though we have a goodly number, many more out there, virtual students in one form or another, I appreciate seeing my students in the flesh here, in the real world. So thank you for coming. Okay, so again, we're in the 5th week, starting the 5th week of school. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. And so we're looking at, and I'll have more to say here very soon about the upcoming show-off opportunity, right? Toward the end of next week, what to focus on and so forth. So today we will be into chapter 5 a little bit, and so chapter 5 will be on this exam, and just a little bit of chapter 6 is my plan at the moment. So I have a natural break there in chapter 6 for us. All right, so oh gosh, I like this little sketch I made. You remember the little with the rectangles under the triangles? Just kind of making a point here, just kind of an advertisement. Here where we're going, and for some reason I love this graph. We pictured consumer and producer surplus in this area here where you have trades between a buyer and a seller. So here's trade number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But at any rate, free markets make for the greatest big triangular pizza here, is the way I like to call it, for both consumers and producers to enjoy. So again, just kind of a high-level commercial or a little philosophy here. Free markets make for greatest happiness when you have the freedom to exchange, okay? When you have the freedom to exchange. So whether it be goods, whether it be thoughts and ideas and what have you, college or the university is a community of ideas, so may it always be that we have the freedom to make exchanges and to discuss and the dialogue. So any rate, take that for what it's worth. Maybe it's not worth a whole lot, but we did last time wrap up chapter 4, and I wrote some notes down here pertaining to the 2 topics we left off on. I'm just going to go through this just kind of briefly, and then we'll get into chapter 5. So we talked about moral hazard last time. We mentioned that. In fact, you know what I'll do is I didn't before class, but I will post. I typed this out here, kind of a summary. I'll post this after class, okay, for you guys if you want it. I'll put it on Blackboard. But moral hazard's the possibility that individuals or institutions will behave more recklessly after they get insurance. Generally, it's usually insurance or similar contracts that shift the financial burden of bad outcomes onto others. So we've seen this in various sectors of the economy. Certainly insurance, we all can relate to that. A truck driver may begin speeding after they get auto insurance, or lenders may start making risky loans if they obtain government loan guarantees. Okay. Banks whose deposits are insured against losses may make riskier loans and investments. Okay, that should make sense. Banks, behave differently after there was FDIC insurance and so forth. And just the fact that there's various other insurances that are guaranteed to a bank against their deposits. It raises this moral hazard aspect or issue here. Divorce insurance is another one, kind of a hypothetical, but it could lead, insurance, say is divorce insurance, could lead to more of the activity you'd like to have less of. So if you're insured against, loss and a divorce, that could lead to more divorces. Okay. Private markets may then under-allocate resources to a good or service that is affected by moral hazard. So, sellers of a product will not be able to tell which specific buyers may act riskier because they have insurance. And so it may be that, if insurance companies could identify the risky people in their pool in advance, it might charge them a higher rate. Okay, so the idea here is that insurance companies, insurers in general, will back off a little bit on providing insurance because there's this uncertainty there. There's this fear that when you insure a large group of people, you will be, for some individuals, altering their behavior. And so this moral hazard problem here kind of works against the provision of insurance. Okay, so usually the firm's marginal cost of getting such information is too high. Like an insurance company, if they could identify which in their risk, in their population of insurance buyers should belong in a high risk pool, that takes a little time, that takes a little money for the insurance companies to identify those individuals. So usually, or oftentimes, that may be too high. So the marginal cost of getting additional information before providing insurance may exceed the marginal benefit. Okay, you may have to spy on someone, okay, just to be a little facetious, to find out if someone's going to change their behavior. You may have to watch them over a period of time. You get the same idea with adverse selection in a minute. We'll see. The moral hazard problem also arises in the following situations. Medical malpractice insurance may increase the amount of malpractice. So if a doctor knows he's insured against malpractice, so he's performing a surgery on you, he may not be quite as careful as he otherwise would. Because if you sue the doctor, well, he's got insurance, right? He or she's got insurance. Unemployment compensation may lead some workers to shirk. So you got workers out there who say, I'm not too afraid of losing my job, so I think I'll just take a nap today. Okay, that's the idea. Guaranteed contracts for professional athletes may reduce the quality of their performance. Again, that's a moral hazard situation. You may be a star in college and you get that professional contract, big contract, it's guaranteed at a certain level, and then again you may not be that star in the pros because again you have a guaranteed compensation. Okay, and there's a lot of stories, I don't want to mention any names, but there's a lot of stories we could adduce in that regard. It's amazing to me how many, looking back over history, how many Heisman Trophy winners kind of fizzle out in the pros. And I don't know to what extent moral hazard because of their contracts may be the culprit a little bit. At any rate, this isn't a history of football, of course, but I think you understand the concept. I better fix that. Adverse selection is another one. Selection, not adverse hazard. It's moral hazard, adverse selection. This is a problem that arises after before a contract is signed. Moral hazard kind of arises, that problem arises because of behavior after a contract is made. Adverse selection is a problem that exists before a contract is made, okay? It's a problem that arises when information known to one party or a contract to an agreement is not known to the other, causing the latter to incur major cost. So examples, individuals who have the poorest health are the most likely to buy health insurance. Does that make sense? Okay, if you've been having heart pain or something, you might be chest pain, you might be thinking, I better bump up that health insurance. And so you know something going on and you kind of have an incentive not to share that with the insurance company, right? The market for used cars, kind of the same thing. There's, I think I mentioned the paper by George Akerlof, famous economist, won the Nobel Prize. He talks about how the market for used cars will fail to clear unless used car salesmen provide certain incentives like, warranties and so forth. Else, if used car salesmen didn't provide service warranties a little bit or something like that, the market would never clear. It's kind of a famous paper. It shows where buyers and sellers of used cars never trust each other. And so the quantity demanded will never really equal the quantity supplied on the used car lot. They'll keep chasing each other a little bit because of that. This is an adverse selection problem. So Again, I mentioned last time we got a used car when I was a kid, got it home, realized that it had been in a flood. So that stemmed from adverse selection. No one told my dad that car had been in a flood, but alas, it had been. With insurance pools dominated by high risk, premiums must increase because of adverse selection. So because, again, we have people like this up here. Number one, people who don't share with the insurance company. We all know this. There's people they're not going to tell the insurance company they've been having chest pains, say. This is called private information, by the way. Information that belongs to one party but not to the other. So because of the fact that private information exists, insurers will guard against that a little bit by increasing premiums. So premiums have to increase. But as they do, as premiums increase, and here's the problem with the lemons problem, by the way, but as insurers try to compensate for adverse selection, that is, they know potential clients don't tell them everything. Insurers are going to raise their rates. And as they raise their rates, then the healthier potential clients will look at that higher rate and they'll say, no, I don't need that insurance. They raised the rates. I don't need that. So you got this kind of cat and mouse game going on a little bit. It's an iterative process, really, when you look at it. It's kind of interesting. Insurance companies raise the rates because of adverse selection. Then potential clients or customers look at that higher rate, and the good risk will peel off. And so the population itself, potential clients or customers, gets even riskier. And so you can kind of get in this spiral, if you will. Does that make sense? I mean, we could sketch it out, but it's kind of an interesting thing. And Akerloff's paper, I think, in that paper, sometimes you'll see textbooks talk about it a little bit. They'll show how the supply and the demand curves shift, okay? There'll be a shift in one curve for insurance, and that'll cause a shift in the other curve and so forth. And the market never does really clear. Ideally, insurance companies would gather information necessary to distinguish between high risk and low risk applicants. But again, this is private information held by buyers. And so it's not necessarily an easy thing for insurance companies to get. So governments have a way of overcoming the adverse selection problem, though, that's not really available to private insurers. They can require insurance. Okay, they can pass laws. In fact, there's laws in 48 states that says you must, if you're driving a vehicle, you must have auto insurance. Okay, so if everybody's got to have auto insurance, that kind of mitigates the adverse selection problem. Okay, in that, we know what the risk profile across the population is going to be. The government knows. Okay. And so they can require private insurance companies to take a certain segment of the insured population or potential insured population. Social Security insurance is required. When you get a job, you have to pay FICA, right? And make contributions. That's actually, we think of that as part of our retirement. You really shouldn't think of Social Security that way. Alas and alack, I hate to say, but for your generation, I don't know if it'll be there or not. But some of the trust fund is supposed to belly up, at least become insolvent here in the next 10 years sometimes. It's been a while since I've looked at that, but it could be, and I may be on Social Security by then. It could be that, all the benefits are being paid out of the revenue stream at that time. So everybody will get a haircut. I don't know. But there's problems with Social Security, but still, Social Security and Medicare, FICA taxes are required. You get a job, you've got to pay into your Social Security. So there's none of this idea or option that if you're a responsible person already planning for your retirement, you're still forced to buy this. You can't opt out of it, generally speaking. Okay, so at any rate, that's adverse selection. So you have moral hazard, you have adverse selection. There's a couple of different ways. I kind of listed some ways we have of overcoming these things in the private marketplace. Okay, the government can force everybody to buy their insurance. Okay, but generally speaking, you know, that's not the case in the private sector. There's ways to reduce adverse selection. Here's some that I came up with here. Consumer reports, you know, that publication that comes out and tells you whether or not a person who's going to fix your car is a good person or not. Okay, so you as a car owner, you take your car in, you face an adverse selection problem because there's some good mechanics and there's some shady mechanics. And there's some shade tree mechanics, I guess. But you don't know exactly who a good risk is. So check with consumer reports. That would mitigate the adverse selection problem. Mobile travel guide is another one. So you're getting information about the seller here, okay? Here, but you know, qualifications via franchising. You know, I don't know, this is not a commercial, but I don't know how you feel about this, but I always, when I'm on the road, I certainly don't mind eating breakfast at McDonald's. I just kind of like their breakfast. What's nice about that, some are franchised and so forth without getting into that, but when you get a chain with franchises, be it Kentucky Fried Chicken, Taco Bell, what have you, you have an expectation of what you're going to get when you walk in as a customer. You have an expectation beforehand what you're going to get. And so that mitigates the adverse selection problem. There's not a big risk when you walk into a McDonald's as to what you're going to get. Labor unions, same thing. Labor unions will gather information on potential employers. So you want to work in a steel mill, something like that. The labor union provides information about that. Credit bureaus provide information to lenders about credit, about debtors, potential debtors or borrowers, I guess I should say. So we all know what a credit rating is and so forth. Before you get a loan for a new car, the bank's going to check your credit rating. Credit bureaus then provide a function there for potential lenders that reduce the adverse selection problem. Angie's List is another one I came up with. All right, check with Angie's List. There's lots of other online resources like that. Right? We've had some work done at our house recently. We had some roofing done, not on the house itself, but on outbuildings. Had new fences built and so forth. So my wife, she's real good. She knows where to go online to check who's good and who's not, who has a good reputation, who doesn't. Okay, so again, there the buyer is able to survey the potential population of suppliers. Can you imagine before you go get a surgery done, you have to, if you had to gather information on potential surgeons, okay, there are ways to do that. You can read about surgeons online, but you don't have to rely solely on that. You do have, I didn't have it listed here, but because there are professional certifications but because you can't just hang a shingle out there that says I'm a heart surgeon and without going to jail in our culture or society today, in our economy, we know that then because of medical licensing boards and so forth, that the adverse selection problem is tremendously mitigated, okay? Now, I remember once I had to go to a doctor to have a procedure done, and the doctor, I'm laying there and he's kind of cutting on me. It's kind of funny. And he says, well, you know, when I was in medical school, I had to retake this class and such and such. And I thought, oh, now's not the time to tell me you had to retake a class in medical school, okay? But there is a hard way to gather information, right? Fortunately, I mean, you can look at the death rates associated with heart surgeons and use that to determine which heart surgeon to go to. But that would be a very costly way to gather information. So fortunately, we have these agencies and so forth that accredit potential health care workers. Speaking of accrediting, you know, so many areas of our economy have accrediting bodies. Is a universities the same way? This is a regionally accredited school. Plus we have special accreditation in business. So we have, maybe you haven't heard about it, but thought about it much, but Rogers State University is accredited by the Higher Learning Commission. That's our regional accreditation. And then in this School of Business here, we have ACBSP accreditation. I know it's a mouthful. Association for Collegiate Schools of Business something. I forget what it is. But anyway, if you belong to that, I know what it is. It's just I can't think of it at the moment. But if you belong to that organization, or you're accredited rather by that organization, that's an imprimatur somebody's put on your organization that the service you're providing is the real deal. Product warranties reduce moral hazard. Okay. Bonding agencies, look down here, insurance co-payments and deductibles. Okay, here's another one. Think about this just a second, especially with respect to moral hazard. You may think that once you get insurance, you're going to engage in riskier behavior. But the insurance company has a way of tamping that down a little bit by saying, "Oh, you're going to use your insurance? Well, you got to make a co-payment, or you got a deductible to meet this year before you can file a claim." I mean, we all encounter that, right? Why would an insurance company impose these requirements on its insured? Well, again, it's to reduce moral hazard. It's to reduce the incentive some people have to use their insurance more than they really ought to. Okay, if an insuree has to, or the insured has to provide a co-payment or a deductible, then they've got a little skin in it too. Okay, that's the idea. They got a little skin in this surgery or this procedure. And so, you know, it's amazing how that works, how that tamps down, again, this moral hazard behavior problem. Okay, so I kind of wanted to go back through that a little bit. I'll put these slides that I made here, I'll put these online either after class or tonight so that you can read those if you'd like. Would like to talk about chapter 5 here today. Go to chapter 5, where we're going to move from this idea of market failures caused by externalities and asymmetric behavior. We're going to go to public goods today. We're going to look primarily now at the behavior of government in the provision of public goods and how the government may fail. As most public goods come from the government. We'll look at differences on that here in a minute, where that's not exactly the case. But we'll look at where the government usually that provides certain goods may fail to provide the optimal amount, the amount most valued by society. So you have these inefficiencies that attend behavior in the private sector or in the public sector. Okay, so we have to talk about what public goods are. Public goods versus private goods. Okay, so that's chapter 5. We're going to talk about public goods. What are public goods? Well, let's start with private goods, because that's the one we're most familiar with here. Let's talk about private goods first, and then we'll go to public goods. Private goods is mostly what we've been focusing on here in this course, and for the remainder of this course we will. It's a good that you get in the private sector, I guess you'd say, but private goods are produced in the market by firms. And they have two characteristics, okay? Like this shirt that I'm wearing today is a private good. Now I didn't get this from the government. I got this from a store, went and actually purchased it. So because of that, there's two aspects to this good, this shirt, say, that I'm wearing, or the automobile I drove to school today, or the book I brought here to class. Now, sometimes a book may be provided by the school, and so forth, but you know, you and I didn't, well, professors usually don't buy their books. I don't know if you knew that or not, textbook, but that's okay, that's just the way it goes. But as a student, and I was a long time a student like you are, I bought my books, okay? So those are private goods, and they have two characteristics. They're rivalrous, okay? I say rivalry here, but they're rivalrous. What that means is if I consume it, then you can't. So I bought this shirt, that means you can't have it. I bought my hot rod car, it's a Dodge Charger. You know, it's not that big of a hot rod, but I bought it, you can't have it, okay? That's what it means to say that it's rivalrous. It's rivalrous. If I consume it, then you can't. It's also has the aspect of excludability, or it's excludable. These two are kind of related to each other. I guess I would say that, technically speaking, rivalrous means that one person's consumption diminishes another person's consumption of the good. So with a car, it's kind of a binary thing. I bought this particular car, you can't have it. But if it's a particular commodity that's on the market, say it's just wheat on the market, and General Mills wants to buy a bunch of wheat, okay, well, that means that there are competing millers out there that cannot buy the wheat, okay? So what I'm saying here is, if one person consumes it, that diminishes the consumption for someone else. That's what rivalry means. Excludability means that some can be prevented from consuming the good. So if you want to take my car for a spin today and you don't tell me about it or ask me for it, then I'll probably, when I see it not in the parking lot this evening, I'll probably call the police. So that's what it means. I can keep you from doing that. Okay, now public goods, okay? Public goods are the opposite. We generally think of them as being provided by the government and offered for free, but technically speaking, these are the two characteristics of what a public good is. They're non-rivalrous, okay? That means I can consume the good, and that doesn't diminish your consumption of the good, okay? Now, obviously, when I bought this shirt, and there's only so many shirts on the market, that diminishes the availability of shirts for other people, because this is a private good. But public goods aren't that way. We're going to look at examples here in a minute. And then they're non-excludable. That is to say that if you didn't buy the shirt, that I can't exclude, or you can't exclude somebody else from consuming the good. Okay? All right, so let me give you an example, okay? National defense. Let's just look at this, some examples here. National defense. Think about that just a second. National defense is non-rivals. So it's to say that I'm benefiting today from national defense. And because I am doesn't mean that you benefit less from national defense. We all benefit from national defense. It's non-rivals. Additionally, national defense is non-excludable. If you're an American citizen, you can't be excluded from the benefits of a national, we buy a new radar system or missile system or something like that. It's not only does it protect us all, but it means that taxpayers can't exclude non-taxpayers from consuming the good. Just by nature of the good, by the nature of the good. It's not that there's a law necessarily, it's that it's not feasible, okay? For us to identify people who don't pay taxes and say, okay, you didn't pay your taxes, so you're not going to get protected by this new missile system, okay? So, there's an example there. Street lighting could be another one. Just some examples here I'm going to write. Street lighting, kind of a classic example here. But with street lighting, it's non-rivalrous. You can soak up street light. I can soak up street light to the same extent. And that I'm over here soaking it up doesn't affect yours. And then everybody benefits from it. It's kind of non-excludable. GPS systems, global positioning system that we have, okay? Everybody, if you buy a car and you turn that thing on, it doesn't mean that everybody else's GPS system goes a little dim, okay? We can all benefit from it simultaneously. And then it's kind of hard to, once you got that system in place, it's kind of hard to say, hey, you can't use it, okay? You can build your own GPS guiding system if you want. You can use that signal that comes from those satellites. So it's non-excludable as well. A lighthouse is another one, okay? Think about a lighthouse on the shore. Ships come up. Non-rivalrous. Why? Because you could have two ships coming up at the same time. They're both going to see the lighthouse. And because one sees the lighthouse doesn't mean the other one can't. Okay? So it's non-rivalrous, also non-excludable. It's kind of hard to tell a ship that they can't see the lighthouse. Okay? Maybe, shipping concern, maybe they all make a payment to fund a lighthouse on the shore, something like that. Usually these are provided by the federal government, what have you, but Department of Transportation. But you could have membership, I guess, or dues. But generally speaking, a lighthouse, when they see a ship come up, they're not going to telegraph out there, did you pay your dues this month? And if the ships were to say no or not say yes, they're not going to turn the lighthouse off. Okay? So generally, just the nature of lighthouses would say that the service that they provide is non-excludable. Now, here's another one. We call it a public good, but mainly we think of it because it's provided by the public sector, but it's really public TV, okay? Public television. Broadcast. I'm talking broadcast TV here. So we have a tower out here. Actually, I think our course here goes out through a different tower. There's a tower here on campus, but my understanding is over by the lake somewhere there's another tower. I don't know. So they broadcast even this course out. Now you think about it. Within a radius of that tower or this campus, that service we provide over the airwaves is non-rivalrous. Okay, so Johnny might be watching public TV in his house, watching this class, and cannot be the case that when he turned his TV on, then everybody else's picture went a little dim. Okay, it's non-rivalrous, also non-excludable. If you're within so many miles of the tower, you can watch it. Okay, so that's what makes public television a public good. That's really what makes it a public good, it is those features. Now you have private broadcast television as well, and it kind of the same things can kick in, okay? It's non-rivalrous and non-excludable. So broadcast television over the airwaves, now not over cable, because you can gatekeep on cable and so forth. You say, you didn't pay your streaming or what have you. You may not watch the local news. But over the airwaves, even private broadcast is really a public good, generally speaking, okay? Now let me say, let me be a little careful there. We're talking about the good broadcast TV for consumers as being non-rivalrous and non-excludable. Now, for people who want to broadcast on the electromagnetic spectrum, a lot of times they have to purchase a license, they have to rent a certain section of the spectrum, okay? And then they can turn around and charge people to advertise on their television station, okay? But for consumers out there, broadcast television is a public good, okay? I hope that makes sense, because no consumer, there's these two aspects. There's non-rivalry and it's non-excludable. Okay, so these lead to what's called public goods. Lead to what's called the free rider problem. The free rider problem. What this means is that there are people out there who are consuming the good or service and they never do pay for it. They're not forced to pay for it, and therefore they don't. How many? Maybe I shouldn't ask here, but that on public TV sometimes they'll have Pledge Week or something like that. I always watch lots of public TV, but I haven't that often supported public TV, say, because, I've been a free rider. There's an incentive there to enjoy the benefits and not pay for the cost. Okay, let's see how we determine the demand for a public good. Okay, there's lots of others we could talk about. We'll look at here in a little bit. Public goods, some goods that are kind of public, but not technically. But those examples of national defense and street lighting, public TV, GPS and so forth, those are good examples to start with. Now, how would we determine the demand for a public good? Can y'all see this okay here? Maybe I need to zoom in here. Okay, I'm talking here about, this is an example similar to the one in your text. I think, little different names here, but this is the quantity of a public good. Units of a public good here. And here's the willingness to pay by one person out there for successive units of a public good. Let me just do this here. So a quantity of a public good, the price and the quantity consumed on the margin goes down. So this is basically this is a marginal cost curve here. Gary's willingness to pay is illustrated by this demand schedule. I've got it sketched here, by the way, just a regular demand curve. So let me put this here. The idea here is that for $4 at a high price, only 1 unit of public TV or national defense. Or here's another example. We build a dam outside of town to hold the river back. Okay? There's different ways to fund that dam. You know, we could build an earthen dam over time. We could say, okay, everybody's got Saturdays off. Show up out there with your shovel. Let's all work and let's build a dam, okay? Or you could have the government come in and fund it. But in either case, you're going to have a free rider problem. You're going to have people benefit from the services without contributing to the good that provides the services. So I think that's pretty obvious, right? So the government has to come in and compel people to pay for the good, else you'll have an under provision of public goods like dams and national defense and GPS and so forth. The market itself, that is to say, if you rely on people to behave according to their demand schedule here, will really under provide public goods. There's a free rider problem endemic to this class of goods. People will naturally want to shirk, or there's a certain section of the population that don't want to pay for it. So, but this is a sketch here of Gary's willingness to pay against the quantity of the public good that they're purchasing. So this is a regular demand curve here, okay? So I've got it sketched here, basically. Marginal benefit curve is what you have, just as you've had before, the marginal benefit. And when we say the willingness to pay, we're thinking on the margin here. For the very first unit here, first good here, this should be $4. So this kind of came over here. This is in your text, by the way, but I wanted to draw it out here. Gary is willing at the margin for 1 unit to pay $4 a unit, $4 a unit for 1 unit of national defense, or 1 day of protection from the dam, okay? All right, from the dam, whatever the public good is. For 2 units of the public good, he's willing to pay $3. So again, as the price goes down, the quantity demanded goes up. So what I was saying is $3 per unit for 2 units. So if he wants 2 units, he'll pay $3 a unit. That would be a total expenditure of $6, right? So if he wants 6 units of education, he'll pay $6. If he wants 1 unit, he'll pay $4. It's the price times the quantity. So as he consumes more units of the good, the public good, he'll do so, but only if the price goes down, because he's willing and able to purchase at a lower price when there's more units offered to him. So if there are 4 units offered of education, say, he's only going to be willing to pay $1 each. So at a price of 4, he'll purchase, at a price of $1 a unit, he'll purchase 4 units. Again, this is the dependent variable and this is the independent variable. Same thing we had before. The independent variables on the vertical axis. So when the public good is priced high, okay, he really wants only a few. So, I mean, it takes a lot of work to build that dam. He's going to say, you know what, we don't have to build that dam very high. All right, 6 feet of work, that'll handle most of it, okay? But, you know, once in a while a flood comes along, there's a tidal wave higher than 6 feet, so it would be nice to have more protection, okay? It would be nice to have more protection. But he's not really willing to give up as many Saturdays as he would be for the lower dam. So the higher you build the dam, okay, maybe that's more protection, but the less he's going to exert himself for an additional foot to the height of that dam. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so Gary's willingness to pay is inversely related to these two variables here. The price, his willingness to pay, is inversely related to the quantity. This is true for a private good as well as for a public good. Okay, we've seen it. It's the same idea for public goods and private. It's just your standard demand curve. This is Gary. We could do the same thing for John. For 2 units of the public good, he would purchase 2 units of the public good at a price of $4. Okay. Now, what we do here for determining the demand for a public good is we add these two curves vertically. Okay. Not horizontally, but vertically. Like before, we would get a market demand curve for a private good by adding demand curves horizontally. This time, we're going to add vertically. We simply take each quantity of the public good, so I've got quantities down here at the bottom, and we add together Gary's willingness to pay, which, say here, for 2 units of the public good, Gary was willing to pay $3 a unit. John was willing to pay $4 a unit for 2 units of the public good. Protection by the dam or GPS service. Can you imagine a GPS if they could turn it on and off? Okay, just turn it on and off. Oh, one day, for 2 days a month, Gary would pay $3 a day for GPS. That might be the easiest one to see. And then, well, okay, the same idea is here, all right? For 2 days a month, John would be willing to pay $4. So the collective willingness to pay curve, which is the demand for a public good, would be found by taking each unit provided. So here for 2 units of GPS service, you would add Gary's demand, which was 3, and John's demand, quantity demanded, which was 4. And you'd add those together and you get 7. Okay? So the idea again here is you get a demand schedule for a public good by vertically adding these distances here on the individual willingness to pay curves. Okay, so I think you can see here it's pretty easy. Just one more, just real quick. Gary would pay $1 a day for 4 days of GPS service. And John would be willing to pay $2 a day for 4 days of GPS service. So if they're the only ones making up the market, the population here, add those two together, the 1 and the 2, to get 3. $3 a day is what the public in total would pay for 4 days of GPS service. So you add these vertically, okay? That's the idea here with determining the demand for a public good. So, hopefully you got the idea. What a public good is, it's non-excludable and non-rivalrous. There's a lot of things we call public goods that strictly speaking don't meet those criteria, and so they really aren't public goods. However, they may be provided by the public sector, by the government. Let me give you an example of that. Education. Okay, let's talk about common education. Let's talk, secondary education. Everybody can, anybody can go to high school here, and it doesn't matter, you don't have to have income, what have you. The government at some level provides, from state to state, provides education for citizens and non-citizens, okay, residents of the United States. But the government could charge, they just don't, okay? So in other words, they could be excluded. Certain people could be excluded. They say, oh, you got to now pay tuition to get an 8th grade education. So it could be done that way, but it's not. Okay, so what you have there is a class of what we would call quasi-public goods. Okay, they're strictly, by these definitions, not public goods, but they could be excludable. Okay, we could apply that excludability aspect to them, but we don't, because they provide lots of good externalities, positive spillovers. Education is one of those. Okay, so I got a slide here. I think I want. Let's see. Here we go. Quasi-public goods, just to kind of make a point of this here. could be provided by the market system, but they're not, because they provide significant positive externalities. Not only education, but streets, okay? Most of the streets out here you can drive on, no big deal. But there are some toll roads out there. There are some that are excludable, but for the most part, streets are public goods. But like I say, there's a few toll roads out there. We can make every street a toll road. The streets that are toll roads would be quasi-public goods, or that is to say, I guess I need to be careful here. They could be provided through the market system. So streets is a quasi-public good. Okay, museums. I don't know. It's been a while. I used to live in Washington, D.C., but I don't know. It seemed like you could go to the Smithsonian for free. So if you go to it's a nice thing about living in D.C. They used to say that it's a wonderful place to live and raise a family because you've got all these museums and so forth that are free. Okay, that's a quasi-public good. They could charge people to visit the Air and Space Museum, but they don't. Okay, so that's what a quasi-public good is. All right, it's because we've decided not to make these excludable goods or not to charge people for them. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? All right, so there's a discussion in your text about public goods. We think of the government generally providing these things. It's not always the case. Philanthropy can provide public goods for public goods, museums and so forth. A few private firms do. One of the best museums around, but I think they charge you. I don't know. I think they do. But it's Crystal Bridges over in Northwest Arkansas, right? But they may not charge. I don't know, because that's a wonderful museum, art museum. The last time, I think they have some science museums there now, or a science museum. But at any rate, it's funded by the Walton family, so they're great corporate citizens, and so this is just part of their service to our culture. They could if they wanted to. They just don't. But public goods may be provided by corporations and so forth. Again, just so that they're non-excludable and non-rivalrous. That makes the particular good or service a public good. Okay, so you got public goods, private goods, and quasi-public goods. Quasi-public goods. Now, there's an optimal quantity of a public good that policymakers want to deliver on. An optimal quantity, okay? What is just the right amount of free education? Or here's one. What is just the right amount of national defense? Now there's one open for debate, okay? Are we putting too much money into national defense or not enough? If you ask 5 people, you'll get 6 different opinions. How are policymakers to make sense of this and to distill from everybody's opinions and so forth that they gather and make some sort of policy, okay? So they have to do a cost-benefit analysis. Now, so this may seem a little artificial, but it's an approach here at determining the optimal amount of a public good. And they talk about what I'm going to show you here on page 100 of your text. I've kind of augmented this a little bit. If we can go to the camera here, let me zoom this out. Okay, so they've got basically the same numbers in your text, but I wanted to add to this just a little bit. This is what we're going to do here is a cost-benefit analysis for a new highway system. New highway system or construction project would be the provision of a public good. Generally speaking, highways are non-excludable unless it's a toll road, but most interstate highways and so forth are not. And then they're non-rivalrous as well, unless it's rush hour, okay? So if it's a real heavy rush hour, then when you get on, then that may mean somebody else can't get on or can't get on as quickly as they would like. But for the most part, if there's no congestion and the highway is non-rival. So in general here, a highway would be a public good. So we're going to provide. So how much of a public good should we provide? Well, what I have here is the total cost and the total benefits associated with a new highway system. Okay, if we policymakers say here in Oklahoma say, hey, we don't need a new highway system in the next 5 years, that costs $0 because you're not going to, you pay zero for nothing, right? But if you want to widen existing highways, that might be $50 million. So the units here are millions, okay? $50 million. Okay, so you're just going to widen some highways, okay? Make them wide. What about new 2-lane highways? That would be that's a bigger deal, right? So that would cost $140 million. New 4-lane would be $240. New 6-lane would be $620. So y'all see what we've got here. These are the total costs associated with these different projects. There's a total cost, but there's also here total benefit. So if you scoot over here, you're going to see this as well in this column. You're going to see the total benefit associated with each project. No new construction. Well, it's not going to cost anything. It's not going to provide any benefit. Widening existing highways, $200 million or billions, it doesn't matter, but wow, that nationwide it might be in billions, but $200 million. A new 2-lane highway system would provide benefit of $350 million and so forth. New 4-lane highway, $470, and a new 6-lane highway would be $580. All right, so which of these projects here should the government fund? Because when you do that, you're basically determining the optimal quantity of this public good that the government feels it should provide. This is really zero, you know. They're not doing anything to hang with no new construction. Maybe they're going to pave the old roads, I don't know. But total cost and total benefit are zero. But at what level here should we provide a new highway system? Should it be 2-lane, 4-lane, 6-lane, or what have you? Well, okay, what we want to do is we want to maximize the total net benefit. If you look over here in this column, I've got net benefit. Okay, so net benefit's the difference between the total cost and the total benefit. Now, I'm going to show you an approach here that is the most efficient way to answer this question when you got lots of different options over here. Okay, and we can maximize or determine the level that gives you maximum net benefits, because the optimal quantity of a public good is the quantity that delivers the maximum net benefit. Okay, the maximum difference between benefit and cost is net benefit. One way to do that is to fill in these blanks right here in the middle. Like the difference between these two is called the marginal cost. The marginal cost of the first option is $50 million. Okay, to go from here to here, you're thinking on the margin. And what we're going to do is we're going to think as economists do, because we're going to apply this later to some other things that we'll be doing, is we're going to compare marginal cost of incrementing up the plan with the marginal benefit. Okay, so the marginal cost of doing the smallest amount or providing the smallest amount of the public good is $50 million. Okay, from here to here, it's $90 million. So what we're saying is, okay, if you decide to do this, but you want to improve or expand the quantity that you're going to provide, that's going to cost you an additional $90. So you take here 140 and subtract 50 from it. This is the marginal cost. The marginal cost, I'll just slide in here, is the change in total cost divided by the change in the quantity. That is to say, we're going to increment our service here by 1 unit. We're going to go from simply widening highways to new 2-lane highways. And that's going to involve a change in total cost of $90 million. So I'll just put a dollar sign here. Marginal cost here is $100 million. Okay, it takes $100 million more to go from here to here. And then to go from here to here, what's that going to cost? $380? Is that right? Okay, thank you. $380 million. Okay. 380 million. Now, I've computed marginal cost here. That's the difference in the total cost between adjacent options. I want to do the same thing over here for marginal benefit. Okay, so you just go from here to here. What additional benefit? Okay, think of margin as additional benefit is going to result from widening existing highways. That's 200 million, right? And then to go from here to here, additional benefit is 150. And from here to here, 120? Okay, $120 million. And then to go from 470 to 580, 110. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I've got a column here for marginal benefit, and I have a column here for marginal cost. Now here, I'm just using a very simple example. That's what we're looking at here, a simple example to illustrate something we'll be making great use of later. The net amount will be the greatest. Later we'll talk about profit. That's a net amount. There's a difference between revenue and expenses. We'll maximize profit when you've got lots of options over here by doing the procedure we're going to do here. The maximum in this column corresponds to where marginal cost and marginal benefit are equal, or as close to equal as you can get. You'll notice marginal cost goes up, marginal benefit goes down. So these are things we've talked about just a little bit. We've talked about increasing marginal cost of production in any period of time. Generally speaking, when you put more resources into the production of a particular good, in this case it's a public good, more highways, the marginal cost goes up. So the marginal cost goes up. That's the law of increasing marginal cost. But then marginal benefit goes down. I mean, 6-lane highways, that would be nice to have, but maybe only 1 hour a day. Do you really need 6-lane highways? So the total benefit exceeds the total benefit here, but not by that much. At least not as much. There's not as much extra benefit here that you get as when you as you get when you go from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, which is 120. So net benefit over here will be achieved when these two numbers get as close together as you can get. That is when marginal cost equals marginal benefit. That is to say here, I'm just going to say marginal benefit is a maximum. Not benefit, but net benefit's what I meant to say. Net benefit. Net benefit is a maximum when marginal benefit equals marginal cost. When those two are the same. All right. So if you go down here, you'll see as this series of numbers goes up, this goes down, and it looks like the closest you're going to get is when you go from a 2-lane highway to a 4-lane highway. Okay, there's a difference here and there's a difference here. But I would say that it looks like when you go from here to here, so you might go from here, 2-lane highway to 4-lane highways. I'm going to put a little star right there. Okay, and so this is what's optimal. I'm going to write the word optimal there. Now we'll see that here in a minute when we compare the total cost and benefit. But what I'm saying is that marginal cost, marginal benefit are almost the same here when you go from 2-lane to 4-lane. Okay, so it looks like we should have 4-lane highways. Now again, we could back this off just a little bit here, and we could find the total net benefit associated with each one of these projects. So, you know, I've got these numbers staggered or in between here, the lines, because they're marginals. You're going from one to the other. But the net benefit associated with no new construction is $0. You just simply take these two, and I'm going to put it on the same line. And then here, the net benefit here, the total benefit's 200. The total cost is 50. So this is 150. Okay. All right. Let me draw some lines in here. How about the new 2-lane highway? Okay, total cost is 140. Total benefit is 350. The difference there is 210. Thank you very much, 210. Well, I mean, 2-lane highways is better than just simply widening the existing highway system, right? How about the new 4-lane? Well, 240 is the total cost, but subtract that from 470, and you get 230, right? And then down here, if you take the difference between total cost, just subtract that from total benefit, you get a negative number. Woo. All right, so you get a negative 40, I believe. In other words, the benefit is not as big as the cost by $40 million. Now look at these numbers a second. I know this is a simple example, but it leads us to an approach we'll be doing later, especially in production theory. But the idea is that the net amount is maximized whenever you have marginal cost equal to marginal benefit, or as close thereof as you can get. So we're thinking incrementally. This is an approach economists do when they determine the optimal amount of anything to produce or what have you, is they think on the margin. Continue an activity, continue to increment the activity upward, as long as the marginal benefit exceeds the marginal cost. So this is bigger than that. That means move to the next step. Marginal benefit is greater than marginal cost. Go to the next step. And so forth. Marginal benefit exceeds marginal cost. Go to the next step. Okay, which is this right here. Go from 2-lane to 4-lane highways. So the idea is, again, when you find the level of output that equates marginal benefit with marginal cost, then that pertains to a maximum net benefit, okay? So I've talked about this little law before. I said, I think on the second day of class or something, if you want to tattoo on your body the most famous law in economics, microeconomics anyway. I mean, if you were a physicist, it would be E equals MC squared, right? Everybody's heard of that. But in economics, it's marginal benefit equals marginal cost. And we're going to be using that over and over again. So we use it here in determining the optimal amount of a public good, provision of a public good. Now these costs here, by the way, when we talk about the cost of a public good, we want to have kind of a broad idea of what is entailed in cost of a public good. The cost of a public good. There's a linkage here in the dollar cost, if you will, and the opportunity cost. First off, there's no free lunch in economics. So if we build a new 2-lane highway, it costs $140 million to do that. You got to raise taxes, okay? Or you got to sell bonds, but at some point the government's got to redeem those bonds, and they're got to do that out of tax revenue at some point. You know, when the government borrows money, it's just kicking the can down the roads. Taxpayers pick up the receipt eventually, pick up the bill eventually. Okay, so to provide any level of a public good, you got to tax the populace. And when you do, okay, you're siphoning out taxes from that circular flow that we looked at, circular flow of money. Remember that early in the course? That means less net income or disposable income for us consumers out there in society. So when government spends money for public goods, that means there's less spending ultimately, at least over some period of time, for private goods. Okay, so we may have a new highway system here, but that means there's fewer people who can take vacations and eat well and so forth. So there's no free lunch in economics, and we got to remember that cost is a very real thing. And when we talk about the cost of a public good, even though that good may be provided by this great benefactor, the federal government, say, money doesn't grow on trees, okay, and neither do public goods. So that's the idea there with determining the optimal quantity of a public good. Okay, let's see here. All right, so your book talks about how difficult it can be for not only policymakers like this to determine the optimal level of a public good to provide, but who determines, or it can be difficult to determine who makes that call in the first place. And this leads to looking here, something called voting paradoxes here. It's talked about on page 101 of your text in the realm of what's called public choice theory. That's the economic analysis of government decision-making, politics, and elections. Okay, thank you. That it can be difficult for policymakers, not only for them to make decisions, but for us as citizens out here to determine who the policymakers are going to be. I mean, we have 2 senators and we have 5 congressmen, right, from Oklahoma in Congress. They have information that we don't have a lot of times, simply because they invest presumably at least 40 hours a week in reading bills and so forth. Some of these bills I don't think get read, but they spend time educating themselves. Okay? So they're part of this thing here. They're the ones that look at the options for building highway systems and so forth, and hopefully they're acting in our interest. And more often than not, it's not necessarily congressmen and so forth, but it's people in the executive branch determine what highways to build and so forth. So I know of someone from my hometown on the State Highway Commission. Okay, right. And so that commission, I think there's like 10 people on that commission. They determine or decide what projects get prioritized and so forth. So they'll say, oh, we got to widen that bridge and we got to build a new road over here and so forth. And so that commission will do this kind of analysis. Okay. Now that commission is populated by people who are appointed by politicians. Okay, so you got the governor, and you got, say in the state, you got state legislators. At the national level, you got the president, and then you got members of Congress. So in public choice theory, we also look at the problem we as voters have in determining who sits on these commissions and makes these types of decisions. And so you get into this problem of revealing preferences of the electorate through different approaches like majority voting. Majority voting is something that's time-honored and time-appreciated approach here in the United States to selecting who's going to represent us in Congress. Majority voting. And we typically have primary elections. Say here in Oklahoma, the primaries occur in June, typically, both in the presidential election year and then in the elections between presidential elections. And then you have, of course, the general election in November. Now, so voters come together, and there's a winnowing process, if you will. With the primary system, you have a lot of times, you'll have an election with several candidates. And the 2 top vote getters may find themselves in a runoff that occurs in October or in August and so forth. Generally speaking, though, at least in the general election, but also in the runoffs, you'll have candidate A and you have candidate B. Okay, and so you have one-on-one voting. Okay, and sometimes that can lead to inefficient outcomes. In particular, not only for candidates, but for these projects that we're talking about here, whether to build that new dam outside of town and so forth, that's when we get into this thing here called inefficient voting outcomes. So let's go to this little slide here if we can. Here is the idea of a project that provides a total benefit over a period of time of $1,150. Can we go to the slide here? Thanks. And then a total cost of $900. Okay, good. Okay, all right. When I say you might have inefficient outcomes from the voting that I've just described, this is not for candidates for Congress or so, but it may be for a project that's on the ballot. A project that provides a total benefit, a new highway system, if we could vote for this. And there's 3 people voting for this new highway system. Their names are Gary, John, and Leanne. Provides a total benefit here of $1,150, but a total cost of $900. It could be $900 billion. Now I've got a smiley face here because this would be a good project for society. Okay? Society's well-being is enhanced when the government provides a public good whose total benefit exceeds its total cost. If the total benefit exceeds the total cost, put a smiley face here. We want that. Okay? All right, so we put it on the ballot. It should pass. Now here's the idea. This is the benefit and this is the cost, but you got to distribute the cost amongst the electorate somehow. Now one way that may seem equitable, in fact it is simply to divide that. Everybody pays the same amount for this good. So it would be a $300 tax on everyone. So what I've got here, let's back off, is a $300 tax for this good that will cost then $900 for 3 people in the electorate. It's a small economy, okay? But notice, the election is not going to take into account the strength of voter preferences. And because our election systems that we typically employ, this isn't universal. There's been some departure from this, by the way. We can look at what they've done in Alaska and so forth. But generally speaking, something on the ballot will pass if it has more yes votes than no votes. It's simply that. Everybody gets 1 vote to cast, okay? Now, there are other situations we'll look at, we don't have time today, where people may have more than 1 vote to cast. But if you have a 1 vote, 1 person system, then you can get an inefficient outcome. That is, you can get an outcome that's not best for society. Okay, so here the efficient outcome would be that this would pass because maybe it's a new highway system because total benefit exceeds total cost. Well, notice here, Gary will vote for the system because his total benefit exceeds the tax he's going to pay, right? I'd pay $300 worth of taxes for a system that's going to provide me $700 worth of benefit. But notice here, the other 2 voters are not going to vote for the tax and hence for the project because the tax itself exceeds their benefit, okay? You wouldn't pay $300 for something that provides only a benefit of $250. Nor would you pay $300 for $200 benefit. Does that make sense? So there's these 2 people here, John and Leanne, are going to say, no, we don't need the new highway, or we don't need the new school. Okay? Like my town, and I get a little disgruntled once in a while as a politician, but they built a new field house for the high school. Don't want to get too political, but the whole thing, field house, football stadium and everything, is $100 million. They had a $100 million bond some time back. Now my property taxes have gone up. So I go, grr. My wife has to hear me complain a little bit because I'll probably never darken, maybe I will someday, but I have yet to darken the door of the field house or go on the football field. You know, but there have been a number of people vote for that measure who don't own property. Okay, thank you. Who don't own property, so they would vote yes for it because their benefit's going to exceed their cost. Well, here you got one person here whose benefit exceeds their cost, the taxes they're going to pay. So Gary's going to be a big yes. These 2 people are going to be a big no. So it fails, right? So the measure is going to fail when in fact it should pass. Because we didn't take into account strength of voter preferences. Over here, you got this other situation. This should fail because total benefit is exceeded by total cost. But notice, simply because these 2 people's benefit barely exceeds the taxes they're going to pay, you're going to get 2 votes for and 1 vote against, which means it passes when it shouldn't from the macroeconomic standpoint. So look at this example, if you would, for next time. Okay, I think that's it.